Hi, and welcome back to the fourth and final episode of LBCHNN for the summer 2020. This week we're going to be discussing the news of a recent oil spill off the coast of the island nation of Mauritius, what Trump's recent executive orders actually mean, a new intelligence finding that says Russia is working to interfere in our elections to support Trump, the Biden campaign's announcement of their vice presidential pick, and where both campaigns sit as of now. Also, a much-anticipated interview with the one and only Mr. Gallagher, who is the principal at Michael E. Smith Middle School in South Hadley, and who will be speaking to us on how the South Hadley School District is responding to COVID-19 and readapting their fall education. So, I'll put on a suit and we'll get into it. So let's begin with the massive oil spill that's currently happening off the coast of the island nation of Mauritius. On July 25th, a Japanese ship called the MV Wakashio hit a reef off the coast of the islands. Since last Thursday, the ship has been leaking over 1,000 tons of oil into the water. The ship was initially bound for Brazil, carrying a total about 4,000 tons of oil. Mauritius has declared a state of emergency and is urging its citizens to prepare for the worst-case scenario. As of today, the ship has broken in two, creating a catastrophic situation. A massive cleanup effort is underway with both France and Japan sending teams of assistance. Now, Mauritius is home to one of the world's most biodiverse marine ecosystems, which is why it's the location, not the size of the spill, that makes this just so devastating. Investigations of why the ship was so close to the shore are now underway. So let's talk about what Trump's 4 executive orders actually mean for the American people. For some backstory, with the deadline quickly approaching on the CARES Act, a new stimulus package was badly needed to come out of Congress. However, negotiations on a stimulus package fell flat in Congress this past week over stark differences between congressional Democrats and Republicans on the price tag of the bill. So on Saturday, Trump signed 4 executive orders: student loan relief, a payroll tax cut, $400 a week in unemployment benefits, and a ruling on evictions. We can break these down individually. Firstly, the student loan relief EO is good. It extends the CARES Act suspension of monthly payments and 0% interest on all federally held student loans. The eviction EO is awful. First of all, what was necessary to happen was to extend the eviction moratorium, which covered a quarter of the nation's rental units. This did not happen. All it does is suggest to DHHS to, quote, consider any measures temporarily halting residential evictions. Also, no money was allocated for tenants struggling during the pandemic. So all this is a suggestion executive order. And this may end up doing more harm than good because it gives tenants the false impression that they're now being protected when they aren't. So let's talk about the unemployment one. The unemployment insurance extension EO was promised by Trump to be $400. However, the EO stipulates that only $300 will actually come from the federal government. The other $100 will come from the states. The federal money will be reallocated from FEMA, but there is no guarantee that the states can actually afford to pay this $100. And since the CARES Act was $600 a week, this is actually a cut. Lastly, we'll talk about the EO payroll tax cut for Americans making less than $100,000 per year. This one seems to be the most complicated. Okay, so I know nothing about taxes. Literally, I pay them, but I don't really know what they are. But anyways, what I've surmised is that this tax cut really is just a deferral. But first of all, it doesn't do anything to help the 32 million unemployed who can't benefit from a payroll tax cut when they're not even working. The move also leaves employers in uncertainty, as the tax cut just ends up being a deferral and workers won't see the benefits as it gets pushed to next year. But this move has also left unclear the future of Social Security and Medicare, as Trump has pledged to end the payroll tax cut completely after re-election, which would dissolve the Social Security and Medicare Trust Fund. So it's fair to say that your Social Security and Medicare are now on the ballot in 2020. While speaking before government officials last Friday, William Evanina, the director of the National Counterintelligence and Security Center, confirmed that through intelligence findings, Russia is actively attempting to interfere in the 2020 elections to support Trump. In a statement released by the NCSC, they found that the possible modes of election interference are likely to be interference with the voting process, stealing sensitive data, or calling into question the result of the election. Alongside Russia, both China and Iran are seen as potential threats of election interference, as China has made a preference for Biden and Iran seeks to undermine U.S. democratic institutions. The White House has denied any intelligence findings that support election interference on behalf of Trump. So let's talk about Kamala. On Tuesday afternoon, Joe Biden announced that he chose California Senator Kamala Harris to be his vice presidential pick for the Democratic ticket in 2020. As a step back to look at where we are in history, Kamala is the first black woman to appear on a major party ticket. Her roots are both Asian and Indian American and is only 55 years of age compared to Biden's 77. On Tuesday, following the announcement, the Biden campaign reported their highest fundraising day as close to $26 million was raised. In a simulation of over 40,000 scenarios of the election, 538 found that in a sample of 100 of those scenarios, Biden was favored to win by 72%. Now, there's still plenty of time for things to change course, but it is clear that Biden is the favorite for the November election. Now, let's finally get to our interview with the one and only Mr. Gallagher. He is one of my favorite people on the planet, and I'm so happy to get a chance to speak with him about how our school system is changing in the fall. So let's go now. Good. Yeah, Mr. Gallagher, it's so great to be talking with you today. I'm so excited to get the interview going and talk about, some challenges that the South Hadley schools faced and, some things that you really thought you overcame and what we're going to do for the fall for our students. So
absolutely.
Just talking about what we went through when we closed in March, what was like the greatest challenge you feel like the South Hadley School District overcame to help their students?
I tell you, Michael, if I thought there was a greatest challenge, I think that would be a relatively easy question to answer. There were so many challenges because when we closed schools on March 13th, it was something that nobody expected to last for more than 2 weeks. As you and everyone else know, it's to some degree it has lasted up until now and will go on into the fall. We were a school that didn't do remote learning, so we didn't have a platform that was ready to go, but our tech folks got one up and running. Many kids didn't have devices to do remote learning. We got the devices to them. And probably more than anything else, teachers were not remote teachers.
Right.
Students were not remote learners, and parents were not teachers in their own home. So there were so many things that folks had to overcome, but I think the most striking thing of all for me was everyone gave it their best effort. And with that in mind, I think we are primed to do an enhanced job when we try this again in September.
Right. Yeah, I want to talk about September a lot. So I just read in the Hampshire Gazette, last week the school committee voted that they're going to be basically doing a reopening with 5 phases and that they're going to be starting fully remote. And then they're going to be gradually trying to work towards an in-person learning by April. Now, what steps really are you guys taking that we can see that we will have the most safe and accessible education for the students in the fall? Like, will all students be having computers? What are some things like that?
So we'll start with your final comment there, Michael. Back in the spring and into the early summer, I think it became very apparent to the superintendent and the school committee that it was possible we were going to be faced with another period of time where some sort of teaching was going to have to happen remotely.
Right.
And it also became apparent that, as I had said earlier, not every student had a device. And that brings into, we have to talk about equity. If you're going to do something remotely, everyone has to have the opportunity to join in. So the district bought enough Chromebooks, that we will be handing them out before school begins to students. Each student will have their own Chromebook so they can connect with faculty during their classes. Our faculty will be using Google Classroom and Google Suite. So that is the big piece of news. The hard part with all of that, Michael, is making sure we get it out to people. And that's the part of the plan we're working on just now. It's one thing to say we have these devices. It's another thing to make sure we get them in the hands of the students before school begins. So I think that's our next big challenge.
Okay. Yeah. And then how do you think that maybe the state of Massachusetts maybe can start doing a better job to help, public school districts all across Massachusetts? Because it doesn't really seem like there's a standard for how schools should be reopening.
I think it's very interesting, Michael, when the Commissioner of Education brought out his initial guidance, it was a pretty comprehensive set of guidelines that he sent to all the schools. Then what happens is, as you probably know from being in an educational family and just being in different towns, every school district is different. So we had to take those guidelines and mold them to fit what we want to do. And I think our school committee has done a really good job doing that, although I can also understand why a parent would say, why is my school district doing X when the school district that's only a block down the road from me is doing Y? And I don't know, it's still early in August. Is there a possibility that at some point somebody in state government says, I want you all to do this? I'm not sure, Michael, but I can certainly understand why parents and some educators will feel frustrated about the different things that are happening in different towns.
Look, I just really want to thank you. I'm so happy we could finally get this interview going. It's been, I think, over a month we've been trying to do this. So thank you again for meeting with me.
Well, Michael, to be honest with you, knowing it's you, if it had been 2 months or 3 months, it would have still been well worth the wait.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Gallagher. I appreciate it so much. And I'm so happy you're going to be staying on as principal for Michael E. Smith Middle School for the next year.
Yeah, I got to be honest with you. It's, and I use the word oftentimes, I'm very proud and I am very, very humbled to be working with an incredible faculty, a group of students and families. It's, it really is, it's pretty amazing, pretty amazing.
Thank you.
And I should also say, I know a great group of ex-students, so keeping that in mind as well just adds to my my luckiness, I would guess.
Okay. All right. Well, I think that wraps it up pretty good for our interview today. So thank you.
Michael, thanks very much. Great seeing you. Always a pleasure.
Great seeing you too. I want to once again thank Mr. Gallagher for taking the time to sit down with me and discuss our school system. I'm just so happy we finally got to do it, and I think it turned out great. Once again, this is our final episode for the summer 2020. So I'll see you guys soon, but I'm going to start to get back to school now. So thank you for everything. Thank you for sticking around these past 4 episodes. It means the world to me that you guys have cared so much. So with that, be your best self, keep reading the news, and I'll see you soon. Bye. It's a tough experience, but it makes you stronger.
It is a tough experience, and I think you also highlight something else, that those folks who have families or significant others, thank God that we have those people in our life, because if we were just by ourselves in our own house, being socially isolated, it would be really tough. So yeah. I like what you're saying there, keeping yourself distant for 2 weeks so you can enjoy time with family. That is so important, that in these days and times, being with your loved ones is the best thing possible. So well played.
I really agree. Yeah. Thank you.
All right.
All right.
Michael, great seeing you, buddy.
Great to see you too.
Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Talk to you soon. Goodbye.